What's going on, everybody? This be your boy DJ Anonymous with sportsbizmusic, the podcast episode 29, and I got a special guest. I got my second artist, not artist as in music, but artist like as in art. Christopher Labora. He's a studio manager at El Fresco. What y'all call this? Is El Fresco, right?
El Fresco Studio in Little Havana.
In Little Havana, good old Little Havana. But before we get into details, you could, I'm sorry.
No, you're
I'm
good.
sorry, y'all. It's what time is it? Like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock.
Well, yeah, we missed 420 by just a few minutes.
Yeah. It's been a long day, but give a brief introduction, brief history about yourself.
For sure. Well, shout out to everyone. Thanks for tuning in. So again, my name is Christopher Labora. I was born and raised here in Little Havana. And I'm a graffiti artist by trade. That's what I started off doing over a decade ago. I was lucky enough to go to a really well-known school in the area. I studied graphic design, and from there I was able to get a scholarship to go to school where I studied fine art. So I'm classically trained in design and art, but a lot of what I do today is almost art advising, art consultancy. I tell a lot of people that what we do here at El Fresco is we're basically general contractors for art. No project too big, no project too small. If it involves art and design, everything from websites to murals to everything in between, we do it. So we really pride ourselves on our community involvement. We host a lot of workshops out here. The studio is also a project space, so we invite other artists to come by, show their work alongside us. And upcoming soon, we're going to be having a collaboration with Most Vile, with Path, Preserving, Archiving, and Teaching Hip Hop. You can check them out on pathtohiphop.org. We're going to be doing a block party, so keep it locked. I'll give you all the details about that as it comes to fruition. But yeah, that's basically in a nutshell what we do out here.
Yeah, that's what's up. Shout out to Most Vile. Shout out to Andres and all them boys out there. Both of y'all working hard, you know what I'm saying? Like, especially for the city. And I like to ask, all my guests on the show is, where did the love of art, all started?
Well, I think that a lot of artists will say this much, right? Music goes hand in hand with making visual art. I think dance is really important. I think that all of the artistic elements in which we express ourselves have an overlap. I've met people who are ballerinas and then they're MMA fighters. Those two sort of mesh together and create this harmonious balance. And for me, it started with piano. My parents off rip as a kid said, you got to learn a musical instrument. I picked the piano for a year. I learned my melodies. I learned my harmonic scales. I learned the basics of music theory. From there, I jumped to the guitar. Then from there, I went to trumpet. For a while, I was a jazz musician as a young kid. And one of my boys who was in the band with me, his older brother did graffiti. And I just fell in love with it. You know what they say, the art chooses you. So some kids, the oboe chooses them, the tuba chooses them. In my case, the paintbrush, the spray can, it chose me. I picked it up, I started tagging, and I never looked back. And from that day on, I just always tried to find teachers, mentors, education, because it's all about self-education. And that's it. I mean, it's perseverance and self-education. So basically, long story short, started tagging because one of my homeboys' older brothers did it, thought he was cool, and then, it turned into a full-time career, and now that's how I make my bread.
So what did y'all tag at? Because I know whenever the train go by, there's a lot of tags, so you have, one of your projects had to be on the train, right?
Absolutely. Some of the early days, so I used to write Prisma. Some of the early days, obviously no longer condone any illegal activities, and any young bucks out there listening, we live in a day and age where you don't got to get yourself pinched to earn your stripes. You can do it a legal way. So that being said, we can talk hypotheticals about situations that I heard stories from my boys in the day, but clean trains is what they're called. That's the word for an untouched piece of metal that's rolling in a city. Obviously, when we think of modern graffiti, you think of New York City. You think of the subway lines, and that's going all city. If you hit every single line from Bronx to Staten Island, Queens, in between, Manhattan, of course, if you had all of those lines and those trains were rolling throughout the whole city, you were going all city. So if you don't have trains, you don't have shit. And that's really how most people grew up in the graph game. In Miami, we don't got trains, though. So our scene developed a little differently. How our scene came up is after the New York scene already established itself, you had cats, a lot of Boricuas, a lot of Puerto Rican, right, cats. You had obviously some black cats that were from New York. They got in trouble. They got pinched. Their parents said, you know what, you're moving with your aunt, uncle down in Miami. And so kids got shipped down here, and they brought with them, linoleum mats and started breaking. They brought with them the boom boxes and started rapping. And they brought with them, the tools and technique for street art and graffiti. And, what we had is a lot of abandoned buildings. We were plagued by hurricanes out here, right?
Yeah.
So after Hurricane Andrew in 92, you have a bunch of empty buildings. And that was really the boom, if you will, of Miami graffiti. And everyone is running into these abandoned buildings and painting masterpieces. They're having a good time. They're meeting other writers. There's an exchange of information. And so we got an interesting colloquial term in Miami for those type of buildings. We call them penits.
Yeah.
Penit. That's short for penitentiary. Because the first one they ever found, it looked like a penitentiary. So people was like, oh, we're going to the penitentiary to paint. Eventually, it just got shortened to the pennant.
Yeah. And
so now we just call any spot that's a bando that people paint in, an abandoned yard, we call that a pennant. So I cut my teeth, at the Marina Pennant, the Marine Stadium over on Key Biscayne.
Yeah.
Everyone loves it. It was the best place to paint as a young buck.
I heard they cleaned it up. They trying to bring it back because I didn't even know it used to be like they used to have like boat shows back in the day. I didn't even know that.
The Rolling Stones performed there. My parents saw like some of their first concerts together when they were dating. They roll up a bar. Just saw like Jimmy Buffett play. They would do boat races. They do the regattas still, and they also do the rowing competitions.
Yeah.
But that spot is actually now a historic landmark, and I forget the architect's name, but he's really famous because it's the longest cantilever-style cement roof ceiling in the world, or and maybe it's in the Americas. But basically, if you look at it, it's just a giant slab of concrete that goes over towards the bay and has no supporting structures. And the fact that it has never collapsed and hasn't had any is wild. And that's what they said after the hurricane. Oh, it's unsafe. And he told them, he said, there's no way the hurricane made it unsafe. It's still standing. They took a look at it and they're like, the shit's good. Yeah. So now it's being preserved. They're still debating what to do. It's actually a hot spot for a lot of politicians. They're going to turn it into a park, or they're going to do more boating there, or they're going to leave it as a preserve to allow people to swim and use kayaks and non-motor vessels. What I do know is that it's cordoned off. You can't paint it anymore. There's been a few people who've gotten permission from the city to paint, but as far as it being like a safe haven and like a place where it was popping, it's dead. And most cats don't even ride out anymore. I drive by it and I think about the good memories, but honestly, it has a sore spot because I knew from the beginning it should have been something for the community. It still should be for the community. And
that's how I feel too. Like it should, because you see, Miami is growing. It's just, I like to say Miami is trying to become the next, New York or even Las Vegas in that matter. But I feel like we still need, certain areas to, keep it up to be like, I should go here when I was younger. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Carroll Mart up in Carroll City. Everybody knew about Carroll Mart, and like when that building got tore down, because I think they gonna make like a new plaza, but everyone my age and up, like we was like damn, like that was like a childhood memory that was just gone, going away, and like same thing with the Orange Bowl, same thing with way before my time, but like the old baseball park over cause a lot of people don't know Miami had a team before them on Florida Marlins. So, but like I remember that my grandfather used to always tell me like the Brooklyn Dodgers would come down and stuff like that. The Cardinals and the Phillies, all of them should come down for like spring training. And when that got tore down, that was something else that was historical that left Miami, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it's just like I like the way that Miami is coming up, but at the same time, like you should still keep like all the historical spots, you know what I'm saying? So it's crazy.
It's true. Miami has a love affair with creative destruction. We're quick to erase the previous presence. I mean, if it weren't for historians on the beach, rich real estate investors would have long torn down Lincoln Road and all the Art Deco buildings. Now everyone is like, that's why you go to the beach. You go to Ocean Drive to look at the beautiful old hotels. But it's funny, one of my mentors and a local historian, Dr. Paul George, he's over at the History Miami Museum in downtown. Mm-hmm. He does walking tours throughout Miami, and he'll tell you everything that you've ever wanted to know about every piece, every inch of land out here. He'll point at something and be like, that's where Julia Tuttle was, and that's where the Brickles were, and he'll tell you all about it. And what's wild to me is that people like to think Miami's a new city. They like to think like, oh, it's only 100 years old or 200 years old or whatever, and that's wrong. Mm-hmm. It's been 4,000 years of continuous inhabitation by people, from the Tequesta Indians to the Miccosukee Seminoles and the runaway slaves that came down in the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, to obviously the Spanish. I mean, at one point, even the pirates used to stop over here and re-up on fresh water. That's why it's clear water. That's why the names of these places are what they are. The Miami River used to be lush with wildlife. There used to be waterfalls. You could drink from it. So it's wild to me that we're more interested in just saying, out with the old and let's put some new shit. And it's all about the money.
Yeah, it is all about the money. And it's sad. Like, I go to Atlanta, you go to New Orleans. I've been to Memphis. Like, they still have all them historical, places, where, good or bad things happen, but they kept it up just to have people remember, the stuff that happened within the city and the history of it, even in certain parts of Florida, like, I know St. Augustine, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, places outside Orlando, Key West, they still have certain monuments that's up, so people, 20, 30, 40 years from now, like kids growing up, they could be like, wow, like this happened here, because even now, I'm only 26 years old, but I'm getting older. Kids, I would say certain stuff to kids that's coming up, and they won't believe me, but they have to look up. Thank God for technology for that. Like, they could look up like the old pictures and things like that, but it'll be 10 times more satisfying to actually bring the kids to these places. You know what I'm saying? Like you're right. A lot of people think Miami is just this new city. Like, Miami has so much history, especially from the Indian tribes. You look at places like Opelika, like all that stuff was swamps. You know what I'm saying? You look at Miami Lakes. Look at Amelia Earhart. Like, she. I think she flew from here, right?
Mm-hmm, over at Amelia Earhart Park.
Yeah, so it's just like, I understand, people coming from California, and New York and stuff like that, they very prideful of their city and things like that. But I'm like, Miami has a great history, like just an overall culture. And it's just kind of it's sad.
It needs to be tapped in. There's so much lost potential. People just leaving, figuratively leaving so much money on the table in the city. Mm-hmm. And I mean, look at the art scene. The Miami Herald, the newspapers. We don't even have a full-time art critic. You know what I'm saying? Like, not even one cat who's just devoted to seeing what's going on.
But why do you think that?
Well, I mean, Miami's always been a little slow to catch on to the trends, right? I mean, look at the culinary scene. We're getting like poke and stuff like that. Poke has been popping in Philly and New York and Washington, D.C. for like 20 years. We're starting to see Korean food come up. Yeah. We're starting to see so much. I mean, even look at beer. When we were Jits, you'd see 5 beers at the corner store. Bud Light, Miller, Heineken, and like maybe Corona or like, some miscellaneous. But that's it. Now you got every different type of craft beer. I feel like that's a great metaphor for how the city has caught on. But it's slow. It's 10 years, 20 years removed. Mm-hmm. We just got the PAM, the Perez Art Miami Museum. That's a great addition to the community. And I'm not saying it's $1 short and a day late, but we need more. We need more money for those endeavors. I mean, look at the Arch Center. When Adrian Arch opened that up, I mean, people were hesitant to go see an orchestra. When's the last time you talked to a Miami cat born and raised and said, yeah, dog, when's the last time you saw the Philharmonic over at the Miami Arts Center?
It's been a while.
No one's going to do it. Yeah. When's the last time you seen a ballet? Ballet? I never. Opera? So just those things that are starting to happen now are always slow. My philosophy on the matter is education.
Yeah.
Miami's always been slacking. I mean, if you just look at the statistics,
It's sad, but it's true.
1 out of 10 individuals has a graduate degree or a secondary, post-secondary degree. I think it's like a little better on the undergrad. I think it's like 1 out of 8.
Yeah.
But if you